Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Budgeting for 2018 SharePoint Initiatives. And this is Danny Ryan from Freewill. I am the co-founder and VP of Business Development. I have some wonderful people here to join me, some of our practice leads, and so I'm pulling them in to correct me where they need to and add a little bit more detail to the conversation. And so I've got Kirk Lamone here with me. Hey, Kirk, how's it going?
Fine. How are you?
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And I have Bo George. Hey, Bo.
Hey, Danny.
And you're coming from where? Where are you calling in from?
Columbus, Georgia.
Columbus,
so a couple hours south of Atlanta.
Excellent. And Rob, you're on as well?
Yep, I'm here, Danny.
Hey, Rob, how's it going?
Good. Very good.
Good. So we have Kirk is the migrations practice lead, Bo is the portals practice lead, and Rob is the sustainment practice lead. So as we talk about budgets for those particular practices, we'll pull them in on that. And so let's talk through what we're going to hit today. And we'll start off with the most common question that I get asked as I'm first starting to work with potential new customers, and we'll talk about that. I have to use analogies, so I'm going to have a car analogy, and I always want to talk about why we do things. I'm an INFP, and INFPs are always, it's my Myers-Briggs. I always want to know why we're doing what we're doing. And so we'll talk not only about costs, but also how do you get the budgets, the benefits of what you're doing as well. And we'll talk through some of that. So these are our different practice areas. I'll have Kirk talk about the migrations practice and some of those projects related to those. Bo will hit portals practice. I'm covering for the applications practice, and Rob will talk about sustainment, and then we'll have some conclusions as well. And we'll do that at the end.
And I get to interrupt you right
Awesome.
now.
We have a question. Get started here.
Yeah, can you please share what you're presenting?
Absolutely. Would love to do that. Let's see. Wonderful. Yep. If you have any questions as we go here, please feel free to ask them. And I'm going to click sharing. And let's see. Why is it not? There's no presenter. Change presenter to me. And now let's show screen. All right. Are you guys seeing top 10 reasons?
Not yet.
Not yet. Wait for it. Okay. Show my screen.
Yep, we're good now.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. So that brings up a good point. As we go along here, feel free to drop in with questions. It is recording, though. That's good. They GoToWebinar added a little start recording on start of the webinar, which I never messed up with that. Kurt's over here laughing to himself. We've done that before as well. So this one's a new one for us, not starting to show my screen. Oh well, it's a new day, right? So let's jump back into the presentation. And so we went through all of the agenda as far as what we're going to cover for today. We'll go through the different practices, talk through budgeting for those practices. So what is the most common question I get asked? And it's probably no surprise, but it is, how much does this cost? And this question can come up very early on, and we've had times in which we need to uncover more details and giving exact costs, and there's ranges that I like to use, and I would just want to sort of talk through sort of an approach and how do we come up with costs for projects as well. To do this, I'll do an analogy, because I love analogies, and I'll probably, every analogy can get overworked, and I'll try not to overwork this one, but when someone asks you how much does a car cost, so I love stories, and so let me start off with a story. So this is my first car. It was a 1972 Gran Torino station wagon. It was gold too. It was just like this one.
Is that your playset?
No, this is not the actual car. I have no idea where the actual car. Hopefully they recycle the actual car because that thing was a hoss. It was big. I mean, this thing was so big when we were driving down the highway, it would fishtail. It would like the back side of it would swoop back and forth in it. It was a monster. But this one was given to us, so this is free. That's a pretty good cost. I like that cost. And then we jump to the other extreme. So this is, I'm not a car person, but I'll play one for today. But this is the McLaren P1LM, and when I researched this, this is the most expensive car you can buy. It is $3.7 million. Anybody have that budget? We'll talk about why people would buy such a car, but that's the upper end of things. And then we get to what do most people buy? Well, most people, right now I drive a Honda Accord. It's probably one of the more popular cars that are out there. So this is the in-between, and so when we're looking at costs, we typically try to talk about do most people end up spending. And for this case, this one's a lot nicer car than mine. If we look at mine out in the parking lot, mine is 10 years old, 10, 11 years old. This one's a brand new one. I look forward to maybe having one of these. But so what are the factors that comprise the cost for the car? Well, you have the make and the model. Is it purchase or lease? Is it new versus used? There's maintenance costs that you want to take a look at. There's insurance costs. There's other costs that are out there as well. So for today's discussion, I want to sort of talk about, for the different projects that we have, are there certain factors that sort of feed into the cost for the car? And so let's talk through those types of things. Then along with that, why are you buying the car? So let's, often before we do a project, I want to know, like, why are we doing this? What are the benefits that you're trying to get out of this project? A lot of people would say reliable transportation. I just need something to get from point A to point B. A lot of people talk about safety, security. I mean, it's going to transport my loved ones. So there's also when we're talking about the McLaren, that was a status symbol. It's something maybe to attract people. Perhaps a midlife crisis could be involved with it. There's also the adventure part of it. We want something that's fun to drive. For folks who are conscious of the environment, there's environmental reasons to do it, to get an electric or a hybrid. This was when I was looking through the different reasons. I ran into this page, which I thought was kind of interesting, and it sort of goes to the different reasons why people excuse me, purchase different cars, and it was four-wheel, all-wheel drive, the quality of workmanship, the fuel economy, and a tie with safety. So those two are important as well. And this is from a survey, and as we work our way down, it's the more important factors. So the price payment is very important. We're also sort of, when you think of price payment, you start thinking of not what just the initial cost is, but what is this going to cost me over time too? What's the cost per year of this investment of the car? I want to call a car an investment, but there's ride and handling. Number 4, reputation and reviews of the car. Previous experience with the brand and model. I probably will end up getting another Honda Accord because I'm boring like that. The exterior styling, so again, maybe a little bit of status, impressing people. And then the number 1 was reliability. People wanting to get from point A to point B. I have one last story. Well, maybe have one more after this. I don't know. And then we'll get into it. So this is a story about, again, my transportation. So this is what I owned in my late 20s and early 30s, and it was a Land Rover too, and it was I loved this car, and I enjoyed so many things about it. I still have dreams about it. Every time this car drives down the road, the kids point it out. Hey, there's Daddy's car. Well, one day I went into a CarMax and brought this car and sold this car to them and exchanged it for this car. This car was the least expensive car on the lot, and It was, it was a stick. It was just it was at least one. There's a certain amount of quality that car needs to have to be on a CarMax lot, and I'm surprised this met that level. But it was on the lot. Why did I do this? I bought this car and I exchanged it in so that I could get this, which was an engagement ring, which is why the kids now call my wife's engagement ring the Land Rover. So the reasoning for doing this was I could see the benefits out of getting engaged, and I also didn't want to go into debt to buy my wife her engagement ring. I just didn't think that was a good sign. So again, this just looking at the reason why we do different things. So let's apply this. We want to look at the different types of projects, what's involved with them that go from a small to a large project. I have what I'll often do is use, I think this is from Scrum, it's called t-shirt sizing. And so I have certain buckets that I'll use for different things. And there's a blog post. I'll send everybody out this PowerPoint, by the way, so you can hit on all these links. But there was a post that I did about this that I often refer people to, and it's just about t-shirt sizing, what we use for t-shirt sizing. And the reason why I'm doing this is because from an expectation point of view, I want to make sure that we're like, if I'm thinking it's a project that's a small, or if the person is thinking a large, usually the reverse, isn't it?
Yes.
I'm thinking the project's an extra large or a large, and the person thinks it's a small, we have a problem. We have a big problem. And so we're just trying to use this very early on as a technique to figure out whether we're in the same ballpark. Are they coming to buy a Porsche and they only have $5,000, and that it just sort of resets expectations for us. So I just use this as a technique fairly early on about trying to size different things out. And I hope that people appreciate that we're trying to do that early on. And then let's also talk about why people are doing these projects. What are the common reasons that they're doing these different projects? So we've hit so far, what is the most common question? I've abused a car analogy. We've talked about the why, which is if we just talk about costs, we also need to know about what are the benefits, what are we getting out of this? And so let's jump into the migrations practice. And so how are we doing time-wise?
Pretty good.
Oh, not too bad.
And we only lost 50% of the people during that conversation, so that's good.
Oh, really? Wonderful. Thanks for the 50% of the people who hung on there. So let's get into the migrations practice. So for the migrations practice, we have 3 project types in there. The first one is SharePoint to SharePoint. And as you're talking, I'm actually going to pull up the website and put and take a look at that services page as you're discussing as well.
That's fine.
Yep.
So you want me to go through some of the factors for?
Yeah. What are some of the
SharePoint
factors that you
SharePoint?
see for a small one versus a large one, just in general?
Sure. So this is Kirk, and for going to SharePoint, I think one of the first things I would want to know is, are you going on-prem to on-prem, or are you going on-prem to online?
Okay.
I don't think I've ever heard of anyone doing online to on-prem. So, if you're going online, then a lot of people don't understand some limitations there are to go online in terms of what the tools can do for you.
Okay.
So, so there's several different options when you're moving. You can do the database upgrade. That's only if you're going on-prem to on-prem. You can do a site collection, copy, upgrade, restore approach, which we've done as well, which you can't do with SharePoint Online either. Or you could use tooling that does CSOM, or it uses the Azure Upload API or a combination thereof, which certainly works with SharePoint Online. And so you need to understand kind of which approach you're going to take, because that's going to affect what your capabilities are and what functionality you'll get out of it, and then also what your support's going to be like, maybe, if, say, you can't do several things. So, and then you'll want to understand, okay, so what isn't going to be handled, and what are we going to do about those situations? Okay. Are we just going to communicate to site owners that you get what you get, you don't pitch a fit, or are we going to say, oh, okay, no, we're
You
going to
have kids, obviously.
yes, yes, we're going to do a white glove service with you, and we're going to make it work. So that's going to be part of the cost if it's more white glove service, or you can have more elaborate communications, which might cost a little bit more. And just take into account from a cost standpoint, you've got to do planning. I just mentioned communications, and I've also mentioned support. What level are you going to have of those? What are you expecting out of someone else to help you with that? So we've worked with clients that really want our help to drive through maybe the communications process, and there's others that want us to be hands-off and they want to do most of us and most of the communications, and we just add assistance and give recommendations on maybe when to communicate and what type of information to communicate.
So a factor is just the level involvement from our side.
Yes. Yep. Yep. And I think, also think about the savings you're going to get. So if you're going SharePoint on-prem to SharePoint online, then you might have a savings in your infrastructure. You almost certainly will, but you're going to have an additional cost maybe on licensing, or maybe you'll save on licensing depending on what your on-prem licensing is. So you want to think about what those costs are, and maybe factor that into the equation. It may work out. A lot of times you're moving to SharePoint Online because it's a better cost story over the long term. But then, of course, there's a cost to the migration as well. So.
And I point this out, so I'm on the services page up on our website, and these are a lot of the commonly asked questions that people have for us. And it's everything from like, when should you start working on this? We have that just to make things simple, and I realize there's always more details as these projects roll out. But there's, what are the phases? We do have a workshop that we can do initially, and then the implementation, and then the sustainment piece of this. And then, like we have with a lot of our projects, we have to deal with the problem of we need to get more details to provide an exact estimate. And so we do these fixed price workshops up front so that we can get to that exact estimate. And so it's one of those things where we're both putting skin in the game, and then out of this whole thing will come a more exact estimate. And so we have an estimate for what the cost for the workshop, and what all the details around the workshop, what am I going to get from it. And then even for us, I guess when I look at the typical costs, and this is where the cost comes with this, is the implementation phase, where it can be, it's for smaller projects and 25K up to some of these really the larger, more complex ones. It can be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Right? Then if you look at dedicated to multi-tenant, this is one that is I guess for us definitely a larger size type of engagement for us. Okay, I'm starting to chat with myself.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So before I do that, actually, I forgot to mention one thing on just SharePoint to SharePoint migrations, is that if you're going to SharePoint Online, Microsoft has a fast track program that, last I heard, they closed off in February or March of this year, but I know they are using this to move several clients, several companies to SharePoint Online, and we also can assist in that process, because they've got a very fixed process they'll do with you in this fast track process to move SharePoint 2010 or SharePoint 2013 to SharePoint Online, and it doesn't cover all aspects of the migration. And so we can help make that an easier process and work with you on that. And we're doing that today with more clients. So
that's a great point. Really great point.
Regarding dedicated to SharePoint, which will most likely be SharePoint Online, or dedicated to multi-tenants, it's similar to SharePoint on-prem to SharePoint Online, but there are a few differences. I think these tend to be more complex in nature, just because these are a very small group of companies that have dedicated environments, and so they have dedicated for a reason. They're probably more complicated. I know that's not true with all of them, but there's a decent chance of that. And also there's some complexity in the migration because the source environment is, you don't have direct access to that. It is hosted by Microsoft. If you want to use a tool like Metalogix to do the migration, Metalogix does a better job if it can hook into the source environment directly, and it does that through its extensions web service, something called Muse. And doing that in the dedicated environment requires a special process to get that approved and to go through all that process. So that's just something that you want to think about. But the savings there, I think, is pretty obvious once you've done the migration, because you can easily do the math. It's a cost per license on what it used to be, and it's a cost per license on what it's what it's going to be in the future. And so you can do the math very easily. I don't know if that's like going to be $30 or $40 per license down to 20. It might depend on, I don't know what they are on the dedicated, but I think it's in that ballpark.
So this is a large to extra large T-shirt for these. We're talking pretty complex project.
Most likely. I mean, that would be surprising for them to be not complex.
Gotcha. One of our favorite project, or maybe for me, Jive to SharePoint migrations, or I'm calling these Jive Microsoft migrations more often because it can go. It's not just the SharePoint anymore, right?
Right. There's like a lot of times it's Office 365, and there's different aspects of that that are not SharePoint.
Yeah.
Well, Rob definitely can talk to this as well, but I'll go ahead and tell you a few things. So
Rob, you can correct him when he says something incorrect. I'm sure he is going to say something incorrect. Yeah.
So it's interesting. This is there's some aspects of Jive to Microsoft or Jive to SharePoint that's very similar to a SharePoint to SharePoint migration, but then there's some aspects that are also quite different. So overall, the high-level process, we still want to do some of the same steps where we kind of assess what's going on. We plan through how we're going to make the migration. We do some verify steps or some validation steps, maybe a proof of concepts or pilots, and we then, of course, execute on that migration, and in the end, there might be a closeout phase. So when we archive content or something like that. But in these Jive to SharePoint, some of the things that really impact the cost is the content and how we map that content from Jive to SharePoint. These are two separate environments. They are apples and oranges. They have some similarities, but if you think what I've got in Jive and I want it to be just like that and it's just going to live in SharePoint, well, you better think again, because that's not the case. So you need to understand what the different content types are in Jive, what they should look like in SharePoint, and then of course we would want to talk to you in a workshop in detail. We got some information on the website, but we need to get into detail and talk about what it really looks like in SharePoint when we do these migrations, and is that appropriate for you? Do we need to do any tweaks? So what can impact the cost is if you need tweaks to our existing utilities and existing tooling. So, obviously with all of these migrations, the amount of content does impact how much it costs. So in SharePoint, you're looking at number of site collections and the size of those site collections. You're also looking about the complexity of how you're mapping things. Is it a simple mapping exercise? In Jive, it's how many Jive places, the spaces, groups, blocks, projects, and the number of pieces of content in those places, and then the mapping of those as well. Is it a fairly simple mapping or fairly complex mapping? And then if you look at the savings you can get, we know this is a large reason why we are contacted by clients out there, but especially on the Jive to SharePoint ones, because the Jive licenses can be so expensive. And Danny, you would know this better than I would, but I believe in almost all of our cases, the costs of our migrations are less than a single year of their Jive licenses. So much less.
Much less.
And so of course they have license costs for, say, SharePoint Online, but a lot of times they already have both licenses in place. So overall, the companies are saving when they're moving, I believe, and even when you take account all the migrations costs.
And the important thing is they want to take that data with them. I mean, that's people have worked for years and years producing that content, and to just leave that behind, it's valuable content.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yep. So we have a lot more detail on this page about all the things we can and can't migrate, and lots of good stuff here. So in the typical cost for these, I know we've been working this through internally. There's sort of a small cost, and then we've had some where making tooling changes and some other different destinations for where we're moving content can really push this up into the upper hundreds of thousands of dollars, right?
Yeah, we've seen like Internet in a Box where they're using not only SharePoint but some third-party application on top of that to manage their intranet, and sometimes those have different types of destinations. There's separate maybe CRM systems involved, or just separate repositories for content, and so we have to take that into account.
What version of Jive is this for?
I can tell you, it's I believe it's Jive 4, 5, 6, and 7. Although it's really the Jive 3 version 3 of the API, and I believe that may disclude Jive 4 now. We've done that. Actually Jive 8 would be included as well. We're on a project right now that's using Jive 8. I think it might be our first project using Jive 8.
Sorry, a bit of an internal.
Yeah, and the Jive Cloud. Yes, and it was an internal joke, but I had to answer it.
You've done much better than me, obviously. Anything else before we move on? I know there's a lot of details here, but yeah, I think the most frustrating part of these projects is getting contacted too late, having just not enough time. And why does it take, like, someone asked us, like, why would it take 6 months to go and do this? I know there's tool changes if we have to make tool changes. But are the feedback cycles from the content owners? Is that what's some of the time? I know we do it in phases, and I know there's a time that we need the client to go and verify. What's a if you had to say the 80-20, what's the thing taking a lot of time? Is it
a lot of time? It is tool changes that are requested. With the Jive to SharePoint ones in particular, there's a lot of education that has to occur for people to understand where you want this to go.
Okay.
And so I think the workshop is just so huge, and so we can't even answer the question as to when we're going to get it done until we have the workshop very easily, because we don't know what you don't know, and we don't understand your business well enough to be able to answer it for you. And so until we have that workshop, we can't dive into those details of what do you really want to have with this piece of data? Does that make sense? And the other thing to mention on all these, not just the Jive one, is every migration is different, and I wish it wasn't, but every migration is different. There's always something new, some new twist that shows up. Sometimes it's just because the customer's data is different. Sometimes it's because their version is different, maybe of something. But we just see that time and time again. We see some new nuance that shows up, and we have to be able to handle it. So,
ain't nothing easy when you're doing it for real, right?
Right.
Yes. Portals practice. Thanks, Kirk. I appreciate it. And again, if you want, having these follow-up conversations on migrations is something we often do. So I appreciate all that you're doing to help with figuring these things out.
Thanks.
Portals practice. Hey, Bo, you still there?
I am.
Awesome. Let's jump into the portals practice. So I ended up just picking out, I guess the question for me would be like, well, how much does a SharePoint intranet cost? Just somebody who is coming to me, and I know there's sort of a low end and a high end and a middle road. Let's talk through all of that.
Yeah. So so with portals, just kind of like your car analogy, everybody's portal is different, just like migrations, and the other aspect is every company's exposure to SharePoint differs. Some people may have been kicking the tires since 2003, and some people may be completely brand new. So one of the first components a lot of times to think about with a SharePoint portal is what's your SharePoint strategy, and that is sort of the goal setting. Kind of like you said about what kind of car do you want. Well, what do you want to get out of your portal? So for some people it's as simple as it's just a place to share documents, but other people, larger customers are thinking about metadata, navigation, sharing, how do our users access, architecture, taxonomy, and now with Office 365 and the bundle of things that kind of surround it, like teams and groups and all that other stuff, there's just so many knobs to your portal that some strategy conversations probably make sense. They can be small, like in the hours, or they can be weeks, depending on the size of your portal, how much you want to get out of it, and build that plan. I think about a couple of our strategy sessions over the past year or two, where we set an actual course for somebody's portal in Office 365 on all the things they want to do over the next couple of years, with workflows and automation and business processes inside of it. So, those strategies can be, what are we doing in the next 6 months, or what are we doing in the next couple of years? Mm-hmm. And then, intranets and extranets are really, a lot of that is conversations and planning around how you're going to manage your internal users and how they're going to use the portal, and how you're going to work with partners and vendors and external people and everything on your portal, and what parts are exposed to who. So a lot of that goes into planning as well. So, portal sizes can be small to huge, just like probably migrations are typically bigger anyway because of all the amount of data. But, I've been on portals of all shapes and sizes, really.
And so from the factors as far as whether you're just using out of the box versus doing anything custom or using third-party stuff, that all comes into play?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other aspect, when you mention custom, it comes to mind is just like if you're going to on-premise in a migration, if you're building a portal on-premise versus building a portal in the cloud in Office 365, your planning for how you might do customizations could differ. Ideally, we approach both in the same manner, but if you're on-premise, you're going to have a lot more ability to customize using either older techniques or just the fact that you own the hardware supports that. So, when you're going to Office 365, then you're sort of in the playground that Microsoft owns, and you got to follow their rules a lot more. You don't just have access to go turn on and off a machine. So customization planning comes into your portals too, and those are conversations you want to have early and just plan for it.
Mm-hmm. I was just the SharePoint branding, or should we also? I think this also has to do with UX as well. Tell me more. And I think we've done those alongside with some of these migrations we've done. Is that just the layer on top of these two, or what is that? How does that fit into this?
It does for sure. And I'll be honest, as people move more towards the cloud, branding is, I wouldn't say it's less of a focus, but I think it's becoming more of a standard, if that makes sense. Because in the old days, in on-premise, you could do a custom master page, and you would really, you would make it not look like SharePoint was always the thing. And these days, with it being in Office 365, there's there's more of a tendency to go lighter on branding and use a customer's color palette, use their fonts and their logos and stuff like that, but where the things are on the screen kind of stay where they are, so to speak. Okay. But the flavors there, the simple approach is kind of a composed look, which would be the colors and fonts, and then the more complex is a custom master page, which tends to be, don't really do that in Office 365, so there's other techniques to sort of poke in your custom branding in Office 365, but you see less people doing that, but it is a layer on top of your portal. It's more like how your users look and feel about it versus what they get done in it.
And I'm sure all the modern pages and the new modern web parts are helping all this out as well.
Yeah. That's the Office coming off Ignite several weeks ago now. Just the work that Microsoft's doing with modern pages and web parts and stuff like that. They're finally, answering that mobile responsive thing that's been everybody's asked for the last 5-8 years or something, and lots of other good stuff coming in there. So the feeling is, that the product is giving you more for free because you own the product, so that hopefully there's a less tendency to go create your own if it already exists, which is what we embrace anyway. If it's already there in the platform, we don't want to rebuild it. Yep.
And probably a good point for me to go is I'm looking up at the menu. Each one of these different practice areas has an ebook associated, or a white paper. So definitely take a look at those if you're interested more in going into more depth with each one of these as well. And it's got a great award-winning intranet ebook that you should definitely check out. Anything else before we wrap up with portals, Bud?
Nope, nothing. And nothing in the things to consider that comes to mind. So.
Awesome. The applications practice. So this is me. I'm going to ask myself some questions here. So if I look at our applications practice, and we're Threewill is we sort of grew up as app dev folks. So this is something that's very near and dear to our hearts. And with that, we've sort of narrowed it down to two main areas, which is application development and product development. And with those, typically it's the applications we're building are either vertical solutions or line of business solutions that people want to create. And they can be, really the factors are we going to try to use as much out-of-the-box functionality from SharePoint? If the budgets are low, we really try to emphasize, maybe bending the process a little bit to work with how SharePoint works or Office 365 works, as opposed to if we've got more budget, it just gives us more leeway for creating a more custom integrated, maybe an experience that you wouldn't be able to have out of the box with SharePoint. So applications can be as low as, in the tens of thousands of dollars to there's some that we've worked on for years, and it can be in the upper hundreds of thousands. So part of this just people will want to maybe try out a line of business application and just start with what can we do just using SharePoint, and so try to keep it small, keep it constrained, and try to get a version 1 out of an app, line of business app out, because they just don't want to spend that much budget on it. So that's typical for application development. The reason why folks are doing this, they're doing it with SharePoint because of part of the reason why we are doing what we're doing, which is SharePoint gives us so much stuff that we can build on, the framework, the just sort of things that are there for us that we don't have to recreate for every customer, or we don't have to sell you our bunch of bunch of frameworks that you have to go buy from us to go do it. Our preference is just to learn what Microsoft puts out there for applications and reuse that and use it on projects and focus in on that rather than coming up with our own stuff. And so that has been a great focus area for us. The other one is product development, which we have. You may or may not know this, but we've probably developed maybe a dozen different commercial connectors different organizations, and so you know, we've built connectors for Salesforce, for Jive, for Polycom. We're typically connecting up other systems with Office 365 or SharePoint, and those are actually, as people are looking at products, they can, you know, if they want to do a proof of concept, that's one thing. That could be in the upper tens of thousands. If they want to do a piece of commercial software, that's a whole nother thing. And it also depends on if they're, are we just doing some of the strategy and architecture, and we're working with their development teams, or are we doing this thing soup to nuts? We've had some customers that develop products, and we've worked with them for many years, and looking back on the whole thing, it's been millions of dollars, but it's brought in, they keep coming back for more because it's really a part of their business, and it's a part of the way that they make money. So sometimes you can free up budgets when it's something that's a top line hitting type of initiative. We've got a couple of other things, just pointing these out, and a nice Office 365 and Azure white paper, SharePoint for ISVs. So if you're looking at building products with SharePoint, definitely take that look at that. So really high level there, but you know, just wanted to give you an idea for the applications practice, some of the high level costs that are involved with doing this. And sustainment practice. So for this one, we're looking at lowering costs, reducing risk. And Rob, I'll let you take this one. So let's talk maybe first about, we'll talk about farm assessments first, or solution sustainment.
Sure, we can talk about, I can touch on farm assessments, and really sustainment is you bought the car, you know, now what? You know, how do I keep it running? How do I keep it looking nice? How do I put gas in, and what are some of the costs involved in that? And one of the things that we like to start with with sustainment customers is a farm assessment, and that kind of gives us the lay of the land and an understanding of, you know, where, regardless of what applications they may have on their farm, it gives us a lay of the land as far as where they stand with their infrastructure and what needs to be addressed, and also gives us an idea of how they use SharePoint and what they, you know, what some of their, you know, governance is regarding SharePoint. So those, you know, those are usually fairly standard to do. Assessments. What comes out of the assessment is, you know, where there's some variance, and, you know, what the clients want us to do to address some of the issues that we identify in a farm assessment.
Excellent. And for this, we've got some of those where we're taking that, again, a two-step process where we're doing a workshop first, and then there might be things that come out of that workshop as like an implementation.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it's exactly how we work those farm assessments.
So some of them, it looks like just, you know, for smaller environments, and maybe in the low tens of thousands is good. But if we're looking at a really large and complex environment, it can be really, I won't say expensive, but in at least $100,000, which is, if you're looking at, you know, you may be dealing with some pretty serious issues when you take a look at that farm.
Right, and that would also be for a very, very large farm, you know, multiple nodes, multiple databases, multiple front ends.
Solution sustainment.
Yeah, solution sustainment. This is the, you know, kind of the glue that holds everything together, and we do solution sustainment for all of our practices, for our migration practices, for our portal practice, and certainly for our application development practice. And when it comes to budgeting for sustainment, it gets a bit tricky. There's a lot of factors that come into that, and some of the ones that we've seen, you know, over the past several years of doing sustainment is, you know, number one is that are you preparing for migration? You know, are you moving an application? If it's a SharePoint application, are you moving an application from a 2010 farm to a 2013 farm or to online? You know, that's something to consider when it comes to sustaining an application. Are you considering new enhancements? Is there something you want to add to that application or that migration If you want to, migrate a different type of content from Jive to SharePoint, for example, what would that cost include? We do a lot of administration as well. We have certain applications that require care and feeding over the course of a year. So do you have the type of application that needs that kind of care and feeding? And then we also do quite a bit of stabilization. If you rolled out a new application or a new farm or a new utility, there's going to be stabilization to make sure it takes seed effectively and there's good adoption. Another thing that sometimes that folks aren't aware of that causes sustainment is just reorganizations within a company.
Yeah.
Two teams are merged together, there may be more users of that application. That application may be used in a different way because there's a new team involved. We've seen that from some of our sustainment clients. Availability of other support resources. We've had clients who've anticipated phasing out support from another organization, so they've needed to increase their budget, or someone who used to take care of that application for them has moved on to another role and they need to budget for that. And then, another key factor is just the quality of the application or the platform that they're having sustainment done on. There are wonderful applications out there that require very little sustainment, and then there are the other kind of applications. So
that have no documentation and no one knows where the source code is, right?
And you kid around about that, but we've stepped right into sustainment opportunities with that exact scenario. So, there's other things like administration that involve, updating, like providing cumulative updates. And if you watch the news, those security updates are very, very important. So,
yes. Yes.
So those are just some of the key factors that I think of, and my experience here at 3Will with providing sustainment and leading that practice. Those are some of the odd, sort of the factors that people don't ordinarily think of when it comes to support sustainment.
That's great. And I've got pulled up here, like we ended up just to make it a little bit more approachable, that having 3 different plans, sort of a silver, gold, platinum plan, as people look at sustainment. And so it breaks it out a little bit more as far as what some of those expectations are with regards to sustainment. So, anything else to wrap us up with sustainment?
No, I think I've covered the points that hopefully just help factor in when it comes to budgeting for sustainment.
Excellent, excellent. So let me catch ourselves up here on the slide deck. How are we doing time-wise? Good. One last story.
Cars.
No, I could try to fit a car into the story, but no. This is a story about Tommy and I do a podcast called the Two Bald Brothers and a Microphone podcast, and with that, I'm going to pull it up here. We've been talking about budgeting and how part of this is figuring out the cost, and we had a great conversation with one of our longtime business sponsors, Kimberly Eubank, and part of the conversation I wanted to pull up, and she was talking about business transformation. And within that, there's a part of it where she was talking about approach for getting funding for projects. And Kimberly gets things done. And she realizes in order to get big things done, she needs big budgets. And so and she's recognized some of the things that need to happen in order for that to occur. One of the things that she, as you listen to the podcast or as you read through this, is that she tells she describes how she has to have a compelling story. And with that compelling story, people are taken and saying, you know, here's the part where she's referring to this. I think the easiest part of a program is the building of it. The getting it socialized internally within your organization and getting it funded is actually the hardest part. That's going to vary company by company on what their culture is and how to do it. It all, for me, starts with the story. Can you tell a compelling story about your program that makes people walk out of the room going, we can't not do that. We'll find the money somewhere. We can't not do that. I was used to large sums of money. It might not be the $50 million you asked for, but maybe you get to $25 million in the first year. At least you get started. You also have the prep work of making sure that you're greasing the skids for the budget for the next year. She also makes a part of this as saying she goes after programs, not projects, so that if a project, you know, so she's able to shift the money in between things in order to get things done. And so I think so often I'm working with customers and I'm talking about a particular project. They also need to think about the overall program as they're looking at this upcoming year when you're looking at budgets. And I just thought this was a great point from her, is you have to tell the most compelling story inside the organization. And then she also mentioned it has to fit inside everyone else's story as well, and how it fits together, and going out and going and selling that story, how important that is as well. Have any questions that have come up at all, Kirk? Any questions? If folks have any questions, feel free to ask right now. My conclusions from this is really I wanted to, again, coming back to the t-shirt size, is just talk a little bit more about the, hey, is this in the tens of thousands, the upper tens of thousands, the hundreds of thousands, you know, sort of a, let's talk through small, medium, large. And part of that is just trying to understand, is that cost worth what you think you perceive you're getting from the benefits of spending that money? And so you have to start with why. You have to start with what are we planning on getting out of this? That's sort of the key first part of this. And then, you know, you could work with someone like us who's like in the case of migrations or maybe applications, we've done something before and can provide estimates for that. Any questions? We're good. Oh, you guys, yeah, everything's been as far as next steps from here, obviously, as you're looking at 2018 and you're talking to a lot of customers about trying to put together your appropriate budgets, it's so much nicer if you've got the budget set in place and we're not having to work off of a discretionary budget and trying to find it from different places. So if there's something that Tommy or I or John can help you out with, please just feel free to reach out to us. No obligation, just trying to sort of set up for you what we think the appropriate budget is for doing different projects, and especially if it's a project type that that we focus in on for one of our practices. If it's not that, I'll probably say that's nice. I don't really know how to say that. But feel free to reach out to me. Here is the contact information. You can always go through our website in the Contact Us page. It will come to me, so feel free to do that. That is my cell phone number if you need to get in touch with me via the phone, and my email address. And with that, I know I don't even want to know what the opportunity cost that was lost in pulling you guys off of projects to do this. And I know you guys are so busy, so as I mentioned earlier, if folks know that the project is coming up, just give us a heads up, because we're busy through the end of the year at least, and you guys are doing. The reason why we're busy is you guys are doing great work and people are coming back for more. So thank you to all the practice leads for what you guys are doing on a daily basis. I really appreciate it.
Sure, you're welcome.
And thank you for the help that you provide with providing cost estimates and talking through benefits as well. And sometimes it's tough to bubble up to that. But we want to work on great projects, and that's where it's initiated. So thank you guys for doing that. And with that, there'll be a follow-up email that goes out to you guys. This has been recorded, and so you can also share this with other folks who might be in the whole process of budgeting for the upcoming year. And feel free to share that video as well, so it'll be up on our website. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and have a wonderful weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.